back.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Keyshawn. How you be? How you feel? How you is?
I'm good. I'm good. It is long it's what is it? What is this place called? Long Beach, where I live. I live in Long Beach. That's where we are today. It's Grand Prix weekend in Long Beach,
Oh,
and I typically make it a habit of not being anywhere in the vicinity of Long Beach during Grand Prix weekend, but as universe would have it, we are staying in town this weekend, so we're in for a treat.
Grand Prix in Cali. All right. Well, that's. I've never. I'm not into that. So
Is
that's
I
too much.
don't
Yeah, I was. I don't know.
Grand
Well,
Prix
welcome.
brings in just a certain culture into the city.
Yeah.
So
We have a hot topic tonight, and I can already see some people are starting to tap in. And
well,
I
welcome.
am so yeah. Say hi to us. Say hello. We always love to hear from everybody who comes in. I'm Kenya, and I am a holistic wellness and thrive and mindset and astrology coach. Kishad and I were just going over some astrology things. I'll have to do like a live astrology coaching or bring somebody in and kind of go through their chart a little bit. I think that would be really fun. Yes.
I volunteer as tribute for that.
I volunteer. But yeah, I do all that, and an artist, and I'm gonna let Keyshawn introduce herself, what she does. But make sure you guys, if you're watching, subscribe wherever you're watching this right now. Subscribe to the channel. If you're on Keyshawn's link and you're not a subscriber of her page, please subscribe. If you're on mine, make sure you subscribe to me. And if you're already a subscriber, set the bell so that you get notified whenever we go live. So if
Yeah,
you don't
because I
set
just was making a habit of texting people, and then one of my YouTuber friends was like, "Girl, I got the alarm set. I already know." I was like, "That's right. You a whole YouTube celebrity, girl. I forgot who I was talking to." But yes, hello everyone. I'm Keyshawn Rains, and I am the Calm Coach. I am a wellness advocate, a certified peer support specialist, and I do a lot of things. I heard a term today. It's the multi hyphenate creative. I was like, I like the way that sounds because I do a lot of things. I have
you
a career,
do.
I have a business that I run, solopreneur, and in addition to that, I just wrote a pilot this week. You know what I mean? Like it's just I think
Come
it really,
on,
the
girl.
possibilities are endless when you tap into the creative energy that I'm working on tapping into right now. So
Y'all
yeah,
thought
that's
you
what
were
I'm
just with Keyshawn and Kenya. You're actually with 12 people because each of us
exactly
does a lot. I said I gave y'all about 30% of
right,
what it is I do, but that's awesome. That's awesome.
right.
Well, tonight, let me put this up. I need to put
Okay.
up what it is we are talking about because this is a topic I've been thinking about this a lot.
Mm.
Um, it's okay to cry, sis. Sis, it's all right to cry. So, we're going to get into that. If you've been watching us weekly, we first try to talk a little bit about some hot topics or current events or things going on, and then we tap into the topic. So, obviously, put your heads in this space. We'd love to hear
Mhm.
your opinion. Is it okay to cry to you? When is it okay? Is there certain spaces you should cry and you shouldn't cry? Should we manage our cry? Should we just cry
Mm.
whenever we want? So I have a lot of thoughts about that. But before we go into that, Keyshawn, any hot topics or events or
Well,
anything?
you know, I haven't even had a chance to tap into what's going on in the world this week because, like I shared, during Grand Prix weekend in Long Beach, there is a certain, shall we say, community of people that find their way into this lovely, otherwise very diverse and humble and friendly city.
Yeah.
So, for the last 6 to 10 days, I've seen lots of very interesting cars with interesting flags and memorabilia on them that you might see at a NASCAR race or things like that. So that's what's hot on my block this week. But other than that,
Yeah.
it's been an interesting week. I don't know. Did I miss anything politically? Did anybody else go to
Girl,
jail? Did anybody else get arrested? Like what?
I don't know. I mean, honestly, I'm like you. I'm in a bubble, guys.
Mhm.
I'm not one that really finds all the and usually when you hear me do my like today's hot topic is hot topic for Kenya. It has nothing to do with the current event in the world, but it is a hot topic in my life, and I'll share it in a moment. But no, I mean, I know there's just a lot going on with Tennessee, a lot,
Yeah.
just a lot in politics in general, and what's happening in this whole, from obviously the gun situation. I mean, that's constant, but then how that spills over into people's freedom of speech and rights and where they stand. And then, I mean, it's so complicated. And at the same time, there's a lot of, and we get distracted, and this is where we have to be really careful, because there's a lot of legislation on the table right now in higher education and education spaces to literally ban words like diversity, literally banned words like gay or gender or any of these things. So like ban, we're not just talking about, so all that stuff is quietly getting, pushed in these different, government state spaces. And, we have to just really be careful, because that's how things get passed. And we'd be like, wait, what? Yeah. So I know that, but I mean,
Yeah. And I think that's tricky too, because like a lot of times when we think about legislation that's on the congressional floor, most Americans might think, okay, well, how can I actually have an impact on whether or not that bill gets passed? They're not calling me up and saying, hey, KEISEAN, what do you think about Bill SB 686? Or hey, Kenya, what do you think about the Congress people that we elect into these positions are the ones who are making those decisions? So it kind of trickles back down to the who did you vote for, who did you put in office, and those kind of conversations that I think kind of get overlooked until the laws change. And we're like, wait a minute. I want to, and it's like, well, remember when we voted for them a couple of years ago?
And I just tell people, if you live in a state that is, more Republican or goes back and forth, you really are going to need to keep your eye. Not to say that if you live in a state that's more Democratic, you don't, because there's a lot of stuff going on there too. But I do think that, it's a lot of shifting. So,
yeah.
So my hot topic has nothing to do with the world currently, but it is hot for me.
Okay, let's hear it.
Today, I bought a new car for Kenya.
Okay.
The reason this becomes a really big deal is because I have not bought a new car for Kenya since 2007. My car was 16 years old. I bought my car right after I had my son, who was a couple months old. Actually, no, was he even born? No, yeah, he was born. He wasn't quite one yet. He was born in 2006. So this is a big deal for me, because I had told myself when I turned 50, I was going to buy myself finally a new car. And I turned 50 last year, and I was all getting myself prepped. I had the car in mind. I had this. And my son, my 16-year-old, said, Mom, you work remote. You don't even really drive. You want to have a car payment and just sit in the car? And I was like, you've deflated my dreams. I'm like, he's right. He's right. And I was like, do I? So I didn't buy. So when I had my 50th birthday, I didn't buy a car. And my car runs fine. She's a little Camry, where my old car, she's not mine now. Anyway, because I trade her in. Long story short, what ended up happening, what finally made me say two things. One is like, girl, you are 50. You are grown as, go buy yourself a car if you want a car. Like, why are you making this like I bought houses. I mean, they're way more, But what happened last week when I was doing spring break with my boys and we were road tripping so much, I was in a brand new rental car. Oh, yeah. I didn't realize the world feels like this every day.
Girl, that'll do it.
I said, why am I living like I am 17 in my 17-year-old car? I'm like, this is great. I've rented cars, obviously, but to have it for a full week, knowing that I wanted a new car. So I literally came back in town Tuesday, went to the dealer, kind of, looked, prayed. They were trying to get me by a spot. I said, no, I'm not going to do that to me. I'm going home, pray about this, get steal. What am I do? And I went in today ready. I said, this is it. And so I have a new Mazda. What is it? I don't know. It's a CX-30 turbo. It's really pretty. She's very pretty. Her name is Desiree.
Desiree. Yeah.
She goes by Desi. So she's cute. She's special. So that's my hot topic.
I love congratulations on getting yourself a new car. When you were like, I bought houses, I'm like, girl, I'm trying to get on that. I'm trying to join that club. Is the house buying club? It's a very interesting
You
club to
live in
try to get into
California.
in
You, as I said,
California.
you can't buy no house, girl. Not just like.
I mean, it's not far from the truth, but yeah, I'm telling you a quick story. I was looking at houses. My aunt is helping me with the beginning stages of the loan process, yada yada.
Mm.
And I said, let me just go and kind of just like manifest and just dreamcast. Let me just see what's out there, right? So I go on Zillow and I put in some, criteria, this many bedrooms, this many bathrooms, yada, yada, yada. And I said, let me put, under, this is me again, not knowing shit, under 500,000.
Oh, girl.
Zillow was like, excuse me.
You going to Texas?
And then,
like,
then I like bumped it up. Okay, I'm like, okay, under 700,000. It was like 0 results. And I was like, under 800,000. And it was like, keep going. Then I refreshed it, clicked it again, and I didn't realize I refreshed my filters. So it included every type of home. So something pops up, and I was like, it's a manufactured home, girl. I was like, what is a manufactured home? I don't know that I want one of those.
That's not such a bad thing. Manufactured homes. I mean, I just say if you have some land, they do some really cool things.
If you have land,
yeah, I don't. Yeah, you're in California.
Oh yeah. Well, congratulations on your car. I'm very excited about that.
I'm very excited. So, those of you watching, if you have, let us know. Have you done something special for yourself where have you taken the restriction off of yourself? Because this is going to lead us into this next topic, taking the restriction off of ourselves to actually get what we want. Like, I just knew it was just getting ridiculous. So yes, I'm happy. I need tomorrow. I said, okay, I'm just have to drive all day tomorrow. But anyway, all right. So this topic.
Okay.
It's okay to cry, sis. We said we weren't going to cry. Keisha was like, you gonna have me crying? I'm like, no, that's not what we were trying to do. I would love for those of you watching, put in the comments, what are your thoughts about this thing on crying while we're kind of tapping in? And as Black women, and I really want us to take the context, not just the general human, but as Black women and our relationship with our tears,
right,
or lack thereof.
Right.
So when you saw me say that I want to do this topic, what came to mind?
Well, immediately my first thought was like, no, it's not. That was my first thought. So weekly, we kind of do our communication where we select topics. And when I saw the email from Kenya, I was like, it's okay to cry. No, it's not. Immediately was like, no, it's not. It's definitely not okay to cry. And then I sat with it, and it took me back to just a memory in childhood where I was probably 5, maybe between 5 and 7 years old. And something had happened between me and one of my siblings. I won't name any names, but you know who you are, because there was only so many of us at that time, right? So something had happened, and my natural reaction to that experience was to cry. Like my eyes started to well up, and I was told by one of my parents, there's no need for you to cry. And there was an imprint at that moment that was like, okay, the feeling inside my body and what's happening emotionally is telling me that this is a crying moment. But the voice outside of me from my parent is saying, there is no need for you to cry. And that's a moment that I often go back to whenever I think about this idea of it being okay to cry. Because I'm like, well, like, what is that going to accomplish? And how does that further the story? How does that improve the experience? Why waste time crying? And it's interesting because I'm a Cancer astrologically. A lot of people, when I tell them I'm a Cancer, they're like, oh, I'm like, I'm not that kind of Cancer though.
It's because you're rising a Scorpio.
It's because my rising is Scorpio.
That's what's stopping you from crying.
I ain't one of them crying ass Cancers. I ain't no crybaby. I ain't no punk. You know what I mean? So this idea of this topic, I was like, is it okay? That was my initial feeling. That was what first came up.
Well, I'm so glad, good, because I didn't know that. And this is why, because I do think that what you just said, this is probably, yes. I mean, we all, how much are we encouraged as little children? Oh yeah, keep crying. Go ahead, cry. And, nobody, and parenting is so challenging on so many levels. And you are, typically when our children are crying, obviously in our adult brain, we see that, all of this is going to be resolved. The fact that your lollipop or you didn't get it, like all that's very, very quote unquote small in the spectrum of how you understand things. So it's very easy to tell a kid, it's all right, you don't need to cry.
Right.
It just slides out your mouth because again, from the context. But again, as children, our parents are our guardians, but our Jesus, like they are like, okay. And you keep being told that over and over. Absolutely, you don't feel like it's okay to cry. Like, why? Who's told you that? Until you get into adulthood, and by then you've now mastered the ability of some kind of way protecting the tears. So, what made me kind of come up, because I keep a list of all these different topics, and what made me do it, because I used to cry a lot. Like I was like, God, you need to stop crying, girl. I just cry over all the time. Different phases of my life. And I do feel like right now I probably need to revisit my tears. There's a couple of things, I have a lot to say about tears. I have a lot scientifically, physiologically. When you were talking about crying, what's the use of it? That's like saying, what's the use of sweat? What's the use of peeing? Because your body physiologically, the tears, every organ, your body excretion is one of the most important parts of, being a human, being able to stay alive. That's how the body keeps equilibrium, and that's how it keeps homeostasis. The tears are a part of that elimination part of our body. So tears, crying, sweating, all of that is a part of the body's way of eliminating toxins and eliminating so that it can clear.
I sweat so much because I don't ever cry, and I also go pee a lot. Oh,
that's imbalance. So what I wasn't quite saying that if you don't cry, you're gonna pee more.
No.
But your peeing is for your bladders, for your kidneys, ultimately, right? Your kidneys are really what's causing the pee. Well, your tears are for your brain and for your emotion.
Okay.
To cause the release of that.
Okay.
And so when we don't cry, literally, physiologically, we are hampering the process that your body is attempting to clear, emotionally clear what is happening, working through the what the brain is processing. Yeah. And so that's why when we laugh so hard, we cry. It's the brain is like such a overjoyous thing. And it's releasing that so that you just like, don't just like explode from it. It's a release. Just like you might pee when you laugh so hard, all of that. It's the body's way of protecting and releasing and creating homeostasis, and then gets into the nervous system and all that. So there is some physiology as to, and I think Nikki Giovanni told a story, and I think she really helped bring some science into our tears. She had a stroke some years ago, and she had said that, prior to her stroke, she hadn't cried in like 30 years or 40 years, like something crazy. And even when her mother died, and it sounds like she, I don't know exactly the relationship with her mother, but it was her mother and close. She's like, I didn't even cry or anything during that. And it wasn't until she had her stroke, and her stroke was significant in that she was hospitalized and wasn't able to communicate. She wasn't really able to move, all of the things that a stroke can cause. But what ended up happening, she just cried and cried. And it's common for strokes. There's a thing that happens in your brain that will make you what's called labile, which is where you're no longer able to really control emotions. So 1 minute you'll be okay, the next minute you're constantly. So she was in a constant crying space. Wow. And they were concerned, and they were trying to figure out, with the brain and whatever. And she though said she realized these were all the tears from the 30 years. And as soon, she's like, the more she cried, the swifter her recovery was becoming. So she really literally daily, cried, and her healing, she was able to like fully like recover from this stroke.
Wow.
Tears are serious physiologically. So
if you don't cry, you also might have a stroke. So got it. So cry, so you don't have a stroke.
Don't listen to KEISEAN's extrapolations.
This is not medical information. No, this is not medical recommendation. Disclaimer, I am not a medical professional.
but it is to say that that's how much we can hold in, that our
Yeah, for
bodies,
sure.
and we know this, with other stressors. So,
Mhm.
but so that was one side. But one of the other things that made me really want to talk about this is I was watching. This was some time ago, and it was a family member had passed, and this is when COVID was really active, and so you couldn't go to funerals, and funerals were being streamed and all of that. And so during this funeral, okay, so, and this was of a dear loved one, and a young woman, a young girl, she wasn't a family member, but was close to the loved one who died. She got up, and so she was getting ready to talk, and she started to cry. She's like, nope, 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 I'm not gonna do that. Gonna get through this. And I'm like, girl, if there's one place you can cry, it's at a funeral. Like, if we don't even allow ourselves, and then like the next person that came up, nope, we're not crying. No, we're not crying. It's like, really? Why aren't we crying when someone has passed away? And that doesn't necessarily mean, bad. That's when I was like, girl, it's okay to cry. It's okay to cry. You're in grief. So that's one piece. Anyway, where were you back? That really frustrated me, because I'm like, especially as women, where we feel like even in the heaviest of our grieving moments, we don't feel safe or able to cry. And what is that doing to us? Like, for real.
It's interesting because I think in the funeral context, it's so subjective to I guess the audience or the family or the attendees, because you have folks where, I went to 2 funerals last year back to back, for 2 different family members. One I was a little closer with than the other, just because of, family dynamics.
Right.
And I didn't cry at either one of those. And they were both memorials, both like, ash spreading kind of experience, whatever. It wasn't, in a church environment outside, and one was at a botanical garden, one was out here, on the Pacific Ocean. And I think that for me, in a funeral experience, I felt less desire even to cry, because I think that for me, from a spiritual standpoint, I'm like, okay, I believe that this is actually maybe a better space for this particular person's soul to be in,
Right.
than to be trapped in a body that was unhealthy, that was struggling.
Right.
So it's what I noticed for me, even as an adult, if I'm driven to tears, it's typically from anger and rage versus sadness and grief. So that's something else that I noticed. Like when I thought about the topic, I'm like, okay, it's okay to cry. And I'm like, yeah, but I ain't crying because I'm sad. I'm not
Right.
crying because I'm grieving. I'm crying because I really want to knock somebody's head off their shoulders. I feel angry. You know what I mean? And in
So,
those moments, it's like,
this
and there might be a single glory tear
right,
that
the
flies down
single
my
one.
cheek, and that's it.
So this is my point. As Black women, we hold in so much that a lot of times our tears isn't even from, like you said, from sadness. We hold frustration and anger and all of these things so much that is the other, and we don't release it, and we don't allow ourselves a lot of times just to be angry when we need to be angry, or just to be frustrated so then it comes out, because it still needs to come out. So then it comes out then as the tears, which is, I just had that episode with someone where I had to, I started crying, and I said, these tears are not because I'm sad. It's tears because I'm so frustrated. I'm so frustrated. And I realized I'm so frustrated because I'm not connecting with my frustration and getting it out in other ways. I'm not connecting with my emotions and my feelings and expressing them in other ways that would allow me to not burst so much that I'm to the point now where it's only being able to come out in tears. But then I allowed myself, because I realized, well, you got to get this out, because you haven't been getting this out. So, and it was a situation that really, and this was going to be my next question to you. It was a situation where the vulnerability was insane. Like, meaning this was not a person that I should be crying in front of. Meaning should be like, because I'm like, they go, they go think I'm this, but I couldn't, in that moment, I had to. And so when I explained my tears are from the frustration, I need a minute. I need to get this out. Then that person actually showed up totally different than what I expected. So I was like, okay, all right. So it actually was safer than I thought.
I think that's a piece of it too, is not being, when you mentioned earlier about someone feeling safe enough to cry, or feeling like this is the appropriate time, or this is the appropriate place, or even this is the appropriate like audience, whether it's just an audience of one or if it's a group of people, for me to feel safe to cry in. I think that serves as like a part of what creates that resistance to crying as well, is like, well, how are these people going to respond? How are they going to react? It's like, if I'm in a work meeting and we're talking about something that is, touches my heart, you know what I'm saying? Or it brings up a feeling, or it enrages me or it frustrates me, is that an appropriate place for me to cry in, so that now the team of professionals that I'm working with has seen this side of me that is typically kept in secret or behind closed doors? Or if it's a women's retreat, I've had people ask me before they come to an event that I've either hosted or co-hosted or facilitated, like, we just gonna be sitting around crying, girl. I ain't coming to that.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And I'm like, if I'm leading it, we're not going to be sitting around crying, because I don't like sitting around crying. So no, this ain't no crying ass event. You know what I mean? Because that's not my goal. I mean, granted, I can't control people's release or,
right.
What that looks like. But, in my family, the Rains family, we tease like, our name is Rains. We're very, very moist people. We sweat a lot and apparently cry a lot. And I would say, out of the collective, probably without, putting anybody on blast, there's two of us who don't cry nearly as much as the rest of them do.
Yeah.
And I know there was a time, I can think back to a time in my life where I cried more. And then I just, in a way, maybe evolved out of that, because there was a time where I did carry a lot of sadness, a lot more rage, even than what I experience now, a lot more anger, a lot more frustration. And crying was kind of that feeling of like, okay, I've been pushed to the edge. I'm about to, break. And this is just how I'm getting this release out. But it was never with an audience. I wouldn't even cry in therapy. You know what I mean? Like, it was just like,
no, we got so we really gonna look at your chart. So
I told you I volunteer as tribute.
I said, we gotta look at your chart. So, and I know why too, because your third house is Capricorn. It makes sense. Okay, so Capricorn is a very detached. I'm Capricorn moon, so crying for me too is, but I got Cancer rising and I got Scorpio sun, and I got plenty support to help me cry. But Capricorn is third house. Third house is mindset. And Danielle said, she said she'd be crying. She said, wait, oh no, Darius said, I cry all the time. And then Danielle said,
my grandmother cries all the time.
Okay.
She'd be crying.
But yeah, so that Capricorn in your third house will also probably stop you from that, because again, Capricorn it's a little bit detached from expression, and crying is a form of expression. It's a form of release. Yeah. It's a form of expression, and communication is a third house. So how you communicate, your mindset, like you said, well, with death, this is this, and you're able to kind of logically put it all together and it all makes sense. So there's real no need for that. And so, but it's funny you talk about retreats. So my retreats are all about tears. So if you sign up for,
you're gonna be crying.
And I don't do it to make you, but this is when it comes to the experiences I create, I really, and I want to say this, your tears are your teachers. Your tears are attempting to teach you. They're releasing, but they're also attempting to teach you something that needed to, whatever this release is about. It's helping you navigate the release and the true emotion that you're actually experiencing. Like, I don't know, the other day when I went through my crying, I don't know if I would have articulated my frustration had I not cried first. Once I cried, I realized, okay, I'm there now. Like I'm really frustrated at this point. I'm hurt, I'm frustrated, and I feel rejected in this moment. And
Mm-hmm.
so it took me to the tears to really understand that this was the time I needed to fully articulate what I was feeling in that moment. And that person who was with me, they were able to see from the argument we were having, they were able to finally see what I was actually really experiencing. And it was just a really, so our tears are also our teachers.
I like that. Tears are teachers. And I mean, there's, anybody who's watching, I'm not a robot. I'm the
She's not. She's not.
I mean, I do have feelings. I am alive. I am in touch with them. I do watch, sometimes certain episodes of Grey's Anatomy. I'm like, oh, beautiful. Okay. Oh,
Did you watch This Is Us? If you watched This Is Us and you didn't cry, then
yes,
something is
I
wrong.
watched This Is Us. Now, I will say that. So one episode of This Is Us in particular, for those who don't know, episode, and if you haven't seen it, I'm not going to spoil it, but there was an episode that had 3 Black women, writer, director,
Woo.
producer, on this particular episode, and you could feel it through the writing and the cinematography. And I watched that episode, and I was watching with my partner. We're sitting on the couch, and I had to pause and like, oh my God, oh my God, this is so good. Those are imaginary people on a television show. Okay. So it's like, there's something in me that was like, this is just good writing though. And that's what I was like, oh my God, this is such good writing. Look at all this emotion that it's pulling out. So I think there are moments where, something like that, or a movie or something will kind of touch something, but it's in those moments, it's just that moment. You know what I mean? Whereas other moments in real life, not based on television, where, like my mom said in the comments, she'll cry happy tears, sad tears, angry tears, all the tears. And I'm like, I know, but like, are we always gonna cry? Like in my family, there's this inside joke, short story, anecdote. When me and one of my siblings were little, and it was just the 2 of us at the time. So y'all who know my family, you know who I'm talking about. We were riding in the car with my parents, and apparently we were doing something that was annoying my dad, who was driving, and we got a quick, like, backhanded, to the face. And my younger sibling was like, let's cry. And I was like, I mean, I guess, like, even then as a child, I was like, I mean, I guess we'll go, but I was like, even then, I was like, I ain't no punk, I ain't crying, so, but now in my family, it's a let's cry, it's like a thing. And I'm like, oh God, here we go, crying again. So I just, it's okay. Yes, I'm not shaming anyone for crying. It's just, it's not my thing.
I think, and I think though, taking the time to reflect on what what's the truth of what is the truth of your crying status, you know what I mean? Because I think sometimes we can believe one thing about why we may or may not cry, but if we really were to untap some certain things, we would realize that maybe there's, this has been your way of protection, to either protection to cry a lot, or protect, because then there is this other thing of crying excessively in order to get attention in a way, or soothing in a way, because you're not knowing how to express your needs. You're not knowing how to articulate your needs. And so you use your tears as a way to get people to, whether you want to say feel sorry or feel, like, okay, that way you never had to really articulate really, really what it is that you needed in the first place. And so you have to be careful with that.
Yeah. And I mean, and we know, I mean, as Black women, that, I don't know if you've experienced this, but I know I've experienced this, is the weaponizing of white women's tears. Certain people using crying as a way to manipulate conversation, to manipulate interaction, so that you'll back off, or so that the conversation will finish because they're uncomfortable. So, and I'm the kind of person who's like, I'll wait till you're done crying and we can move on, because we're going to do this thing, So I think that's another piece of it too, is that I understand how, for us specifically as Black women, the way we walk in the world, that has essentially in this country specifically required us to tap very deeply into our divine masculine, to tap very deeply into that protective, strong Black woman trope that's been assigned to us. And so giving Black women permission to cry, just so y'all know, yes, it is okay for you to
Yeah.
cry. And it's
Yeah.
also important for you to feel safe to do so. And I understand also the feeling of resistance about, well, if I, like you said, if I cry in front of this particular person,
Right.
if I let this particular audience see me cry, then how will they view me differently? Is that going to compromise the position that I have? Is that going to modify their perspective of me? Are they going to see me as weak or too vulnerable or a crybaby or whatever it is? And it's like, ain't none of that. I mean, I have friends who we just be having a conversation and they just start crying. I'm like, girl, you're just crying. Okay, well, I mean, it's fine. I'm not going to cry, but hey, I'll be here with you in your tears. That's fine. I try, I do my best to create the safe space, but I can also feel it coming. I'm like, oh, you're about to cry, aren't you? Okay. All right.
And so it is so funny because I'm totally opposite. I'm like, let it go, girl. Cry, like cry, because I feel so many. Because to me, when we suppress, if you're suppressed, it's one thing if you're not wired to connect with your emotions in a way that tears come up for you, which is what it sounds more like for you. It's another thing when we do feel like we want to cry, but we've gotten so good at conditioning ourselves to not. That's where I get like, it's okay, sis, to cry. Because at this point, you're now, again, the body physiologically, if it's wanting the release, you want to give it that because it's helping you. It's helping you actually work through. So, my big thing is if you are feeling the urge to cry, if you're feeling the thing to cry, I say, like, I know the workplace, I was just talking about this with a group of students yesterday because one of the 12 jobs I have, I work at university. And we were asking, is it professional? Is it unprofessional to cry at work? And, my director, who's just the coolest human ever, I've cried in front of her because I know how safe she is. And I didn't feel like it was unprofessional with her because of that. And so we were trying to kind of divide that. But I've also been in places where I know it's not safe. So what I will do if I'm really feeling that is, for me, it's always a bathroom. Bathroom is the release hall, not just for your pee, but for your tears. And so anytime you can always know when Kenya, when Kenya, is upset, she goes to the bathroom, she is going to go cry. It's like I need, so I think finding the safe spaces, whether it be a literal room, a literal physical space, or a human, someone that you trust, but find the space if the urge is coming. If you are going through a lot of shit, like a lot, and you're finding that you can't remember the last time you've cried, you need to check in. And when I say a lot of shit, I don't mean like busy. I'm talking about this person did this, somebody died, somebody were this, you lost your job, you lost, like if all of that's happening and you haven't found a space of release through your tears, I think you really do want to really check in and investigate that. Because again, that could mean there's a pretty significant suppression. I promise you this is going somewhere in your body because the body has to get it out.
I
So
was
it
going to ask
manifests
that, like,
otherwise.
if it's
Absolutely.
living somewhere else. It's like, so
Yes.
again, not medical advice, but if you notice that you got a little belly, maybe it's time to cry. Maybe if your bones are feeling weird, time to cry. But yeah, and so in that context, if you're not feeling that urge, with the exception of a great episode of, good writing on TV.
This is
You know what
us.
I'm saying? Like I watch Grey's Anatomy a lot. I'm a Grey's fan.
Yeah.
There was an episode recently where, there are doctors that work in a hospital and they lose patients. And there were two characters that they stepped inside of an elevator, one the male character and the female character. And the guy says to the woman, like, it's okay. Like, you can let it out. And he kind of like paused the elevator and she just was like, "Ugh," and had her whole meltdown. And then she was like, okay, I'm over it. And then like just stepped back in. So I guess, yeah, if you're feeling that, then like you said, giving yourself the space to just let it out. I think also on that same note, if you notice that you're crying every single day excessively,
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
also might be an invitation for you to check in, to kind of see like,
Absolutely.
what are you carrying? What are you reliving, replaying that's still bringing up that level of discomfort, whether it's anger, sadness, or anything in between, that's having you like constantly crying, like unable to get through the day without constantly crying, not just a single tear or just a moment where you kind of feel touched or whatever. But yeah, I mean, my partner calls me a computer all the time. She's
She
like, you're
did.
like
She
a
said, "My
computer.
little computer."
Yeah.
Yeah, and when you were talking about the constantly crying, so this tears get tricky. This gets tricky
Okay. Yeah.
because and I don't want to put I'm not going to put this person on blast, but I have someone very, very close to me who lost someone very, very close to them, and she has found herself, it's better, but had found herself crying daily, like all the time, just really. And I'm like, you have to. You're
Mhm.
grieving, and this is a person who didn't typically cry like that, so that was what was really bothering her. And I'm like, no, this is how you are dealing with this, and
Yeah.
it's okay. The other thing, I went through a period where I was in a really I probably was deep. I don't know if I was clinically depressed because I was
Mm-hmm.
functioning, but I definitely was in a depressive mood. And I
Mm-hmm.
literally cried every single day for a strong, I don't know. It felt like it was at least a year. It felt like it was a long time. I'm sure it wasn't that
Yeah.
long, but it was definitely several weeks, months.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found was, I mean, it again became my teacher. It taught me something is really wrong.
Yeah.
Something is really wrong here because, and not so much wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
The situation I was, and I'll just be transparent, you know, for me, my marriage was just not, it was not something that I felt like I fully chose. It felt like it was put upon me. And I
Mm-hmm.
know it wasn't because I said I do and, all the things, but spiritually, I was so immature. I was so
Yeah.
young and naive. I didn't know how to state really my needs. I didn't know how to say no. I was heavy in the people pleasing. And so I kept all of that in. And so me crying all the time was my way of grieving the
Yeah.
loss of my choice, like grieving the fact that I was in this situation that I couldn't figure out how to get myself out of.
Right.
So it actually became very therapeutic for me because
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't feeling courageous enough at that point in my life to actually make changes in that relationship. And so
Right.
crying actually gave me this false sense of like, it gave me comfort. Like it was like the thing I could
Okay.
control. Like I
Yeah.
couldn't really control it, but I could have it. I could just cry. I could just be sad. I could feel, and then, okay, let me go to work now. But at least I had the moment to kind of to grieve this situation. I couldn't talk to friends about it because,
Mm-hmm.
you know, one, I didn't want to feel like I was being judged because
Right.
on paper, it just didn't seem like there was any reason for me to be this unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
And really, it wasn't even just the marriage. The marriage, it had embodied itself in the marriage, but this was all prior to him. This is all my inner child. All that stuff was just coming
Mm-hmm.
to just bake there.
Yeah.
But that's so I had to cry every day, and eventually I stopped. But the way that it stopped, because I was crying so much, I realized I needed help.
Yeah.
And so
It was like,
that's when I went and got therapy and really said, okay, I got to get serious about this
mm-hmm.
because the crying feels good in the moment, but nothing is changing in my life. Like I'm still stuck.
Yeah, and I think I'm glad you said that, is that the crying is happening in the moment, but nothing is changing. So, I mean, and I know when we think about when we think about crying through the grieving process, if you're going through each stage of grief, there's different emotions that kind of come with each of those stages. And I know for some, losing a parent, losing a child, losing someone very close to you, losing someone that you have a close relationship with, whether suddenly or slowly over time, of course, is going to cause grieving. And I think that for me, something that I was thinking about while I was listening was I often, if I where I've like cried in the last year for that matter, it's typically when someone else is crying because they're really in pain. And it's
Yeah,
kind of like,
yeah.
it's like, oh,
It's like a
because
yawn.
it's
Oh, you're
that,
gonna make
yeah,
me
you
cry
yawn,
now.
you're gonna make me, yeah, or like, yeah, it's like a yawn. And so, but
Yeah.
outside of that, it's kind of like, I haven't felt that urge, like you said earlier. I think something too, part of why I notice that I will sometimes cry when someone else is crying, when they're really in pain, or just when they're, when they're feeling that discomfort, it's coming from that empathic energy of like, I'm crying for you, but I'm not actually feeling the feelings that you're having. It's like,
Right.
I'm,
Right.
like when my sister said, let's cry. Okay, you're crying. Okay, great. I'll cry with you. It's kind of like, so then I'm like, well, shit, am I just crying because I'm a people pleaser? Like, do I actually have the feeling? So yeah, I notice that does happen. But it depends. Obviously, if I'm around people who cry all the time, it's not going to be quite the same. But there are moments that I can recall. I mean, I have close friends who've lost parents in the last year, and, friends who've lost, close mentors and things. And they might, cry or express their sadness in front of me. And I'll do my best to, hold that space for them. Clients cry, like I think that there is a part of me that's wired, like you said, from way, way, way back when, to not cry. And
Yeah.
then there's also a part of me that does have the capacity to just genuinely feel empathy. And then from that empathic experience, it does often result in tears, or just from great television. So, that's,
And you're very connected too. So that's why I knew. I was like, no, what's her, here I go with my astrology. I'm like, no, what's her wiring? And because depending on how you're energetically wired, there's some people you can tell they're just very detached. And so
yeah.
the tears are happening because there's an avoidance happening.
Hmm.
There's a lack of a connection happening somewhere.
Right.
I as I've gotten to know you, you're extremely connected. So to me, that's, there's just a wiring, hearing you
Yeah.
and knowing more about your astrology is like, yeah, no, she's not going to be a big crier. That's just
Right.
not how she's going
Yeah.
to navigate, her emotions.
Right.
But yeah, well, it's okay to cry, sis. Yeah,
Yes.
I think it is okay, and but I do think let your tears be a bit of your teacher. I mean, that's how I use my tears. I sometimes miss crying because I'm not a big
Mm.
crier either, and I will
Hmm.
say even like when my father passed, which was my biggest loss,
Okay.
obviously so far. I felt like I lost my dad so long before he actually passed because he had dementia, advanced dementia, Alzheimer's, and I
Hmm.
lost him. And so more of my tears, the frustration I was having with that and the pain of watching him become nothing of who he was, I was way more in my family. And I know my family thinks I'm like you, like totally stoic, because I'm not one
Mm.
that does. And so if Kenya is crying in front of her sister and her mom says like, what's
Hmm.
going on? Because that's just not very
Yeah.
similar. I just am not, wasn't wired that way.
Hmm.
And when my dad, when he passed, I did fall apart like the
Okay.
day, when it all just kind of happened. I just, it became a bit much. But
Hmm.
after that fall apart, I have this understanding or this idea of death. And for
Yeah.
me, I know in my heart and in my soul that, he is now finally back to him and with
Yeah.
me in a way. So I'm like, he shows up in my dreams as him, not as
Right.
confused as. So I have just a lot of just gratitude for that. So I tend
Right.
to, so my tears are definitely usually from frustration. And so if you are
Hmm.
someone, sit down and kind of think about that when you do have your tears. What are the lessons? What is it teaching you? What is it teaching about yourself?
Hmm.
Because it's doing a physiological release to get you some equilibrium, but it's also
Hmm.
helping for you to get a little bit more informed maybe on some emotions that you maybe not are more subconscious and you're not really able to see yet. So
I like that. The idea of if you're a person who cries all the time, or if you're a person who cries, very scarcely, or somewhere in between, giving yourself a chance to sit back and ask, okay, what are these tears here to teach me? What is this about? Because I know that if I think about like moments, just even in the past couple of weeks, we went to go see a play last week called Twilight. that was it's a really dope collection of pieces from the April 1992 riots in LA and the events building up to it, the riot itself, and then afterward. And there was one of the actresses who was giving a speech as Maxine Waters. And as she was giving the speech, I felt myself getting emotional because she was talking about just the treatment of Black people in this country and racism and all these very heavy systems that weigh on the shoulders of Black men and women, that I was like, I was so mad just listening to it. That brought me to a tearful place. So again, like frustration of our realities, frustration of the injustice, the inequalities, and those kinds of things. I feel like when those tears come up, I know that the root of it is this feeling of being like trapped, like, okay,
trapped.
And what? Yes, we live in a terrible place. Yes, it's in like, yeah. And what are you gonna do about it, girl? Nothing. Cry. Okay. Go ahead, cry. Get it out.
Keisha, she goes that direction. I'm like, just let it out, and the world will be peaceful again. But
I'm like that's my dad talking. It's like it is what it is,
But I think as Black women, it's just this be my last thing to say, and we'll begin to wrap up. But I think this is critical because as Black women, we are navigating all of these very complicated layers on top of having stored up epigenetic trauma on top of all of this. So we have a lot to cry about. On a lot of levels.
Yeah.
And that is okay. And if that, I just say so that because you gotta release this if it's gonna come in the form of tears, if it's gonna come in the form of something you do, something more physically and active, whatever. But we've got to. My bigger point of this is: are you releasing the stressors, the fears, the frustrations, the sadness, the grief? And don't think of grief just in terms of death. We're constantly grieving. Grieving is about loss. So loss happens all the time around us. And, it's okay. And then, yes, tears can show up as this just made me feel so good, or I'm just so happy in this moment. I'm so proud in this moment. I'm so grateful in this moment. Wherever it shows up, I just really, here is the permission slip from me to you. Find a safe space and go cry. Go cry. Let it. Get the safe space though, because you can, when you're not safe, that you're not even it's not gonna teach you this. You're not even gonna be able to get the full release that really is necessary.
Yeah, heard. I agree. Kenya said it's okay. I mean, yes, I'm sure it's okay. No, it's
She's like, it's okay, I guess.
It's cool, whatever. Hurry up. No, just kidding.
She said, hurry up.
No, I agree. I think it is okay to cry, and I think that if you don't feel that it's safe for you to cry in the company of your partner or your children or your friends, then it might be time for a little bit of assessment and reevaluation of some of those relationships, because you do want to feel safe in your most intimate relationships. You do want to feel that those are safe spaces for you to cry, for you to release, for you to feel vulnerable without judgment, without change in perspective of who you are and what you stand for, what you're about, or without judgment or questioning your strength or anything like that. I think that it's important in those spaces, because if not there with them, then where do you feel safe, other than a bathroom stall or a secret place? So I feel like it's important for us to know where those safe spaces are. And if you don't know where those safe spaces are, then it might be time to, reach out and find support outside of your family and friends.
Because a lot of people don't have safe relations. I would say I almost beg to say that the majority of people don't have safe enough relationships.
Right.
To be that vulnerable. And creating safe relationships like that require a certain level of vulnerability on your part. And so this is another reason to get support and to get help, so that you are building relationships that in fact are safe.
Yeah.
Giving, if you were raised in an environment that wasn't safe at all. And so what happens is you're going to now always have that guard, which means you're never therefore then building relationships of safety either. So now it's very isolating because it's like, where is the safety? I just want safety. And it's like, yeah, but you were never really taught how to create safe relationships or how to relate in safe ways. And so this is why, coaching, therapy, all of these things are so, especially right now, we've got to be more holistic. We cannot just stay in traditional medical models because they don't teach how to do that in a lot of times. And so I do think that the work that KEISEAN does, I think the work that I do, I know many, many, many other women Black women who are doing some amazing healing spaces things, like just really trying to create a space for women, Black women to be seen, to be held, to be loved. And, we have to be willing. And those of us who are over 50, 45 plus or whatever, this is strange territory to be finding some groups of girls to cry with. It's like, wait, what? You say
right? What? I don't know, y'all. Yeah. No, but it's so important. It's so important though. I think it's important too because I think that's another conversation. I wrote that down actually the other day for us to maybe have a conversation about making friends as a grown-ass woman, what that looks like, because sometimes finding the spaces to not only feel safe, to be vulnerable and be your whole self in, but also finding spaces where you can genuinely fit in as your whole self, because sometimes the relationships that we had in our earlier stages of adulthood just don't make sense anymore, friendship wise.
Oh my God. That's it. Yes. So put that. Yes, please put, because yes, that was my podcast episode. I didn't go as deep, but that was, yes. It's another topic. Friendships. Well, this was good. I enjoyed really it. Yes. So I got to, you've got me now thinking about tears. I am very much the one just cry. But yeah, it's good. You said, girl, really? Do you need to cry?
Like, and I'm like, okay, tears are teachers. Okay.
Tears are teachers. All right.
And Grey's Anatomy made me cry. But what is the lesson
Well,
here?
This is the thing. If you want to cry and you're having a hard time, yes, we just go watch This Is Us. You're going to find an episode. And you will get your cry on.
And there will be, and then you can sit with them and reflect on the lesson.
Yes.
So, no, this was good. I love this conversation.
Awesome. All right. So we always do, we end with highlighting or promoting or saying something about something. Do you have anything to highlight? It could be one of our services too. I think we probably should start doing that more, but
that's probably a good idea. Yeah, probably a good idea. I got a new client this week because I almost forgot that I was doing coaching, and I was like, "Oh, hey, found me on Instagram," so that's exciting. But no, this week I want to promote. I want to highlight my sister Karma. So Karma's hosting a sensuality workshop this Saturday, April 15th in North Hollywood in California. She still has some spots available. So if you've never attended a sensuality workshop or a sensuality class or had a private sensuality experience with Karma, it is really transformational. It's not pole dancing, it's not a striptease, it's really just an invitation for women primarily, but it is open to everyone to just get into a place where they're genuinely comfortable and safe within their bodies. And so she rarely has spots available this close to the workshop, so that tells me that there's still room for some more. So you can find her on Instagram at by Karma Rains, or you can Google her website's by Karma Rains. So that's what I want to highlight.
She is super duper 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 dope. Oh my God. So I've taken one, she for my whole 50th, she hosted, well, not hosted, but she was the instructor. She choreographed, she facilitated a whole sensual dance routine for us. And it was magical. And so she is now also going to be involved in one of my retreats. I would promote this retreat, but this retreat is a closed retreat. You had to have already, it's for a specific group of women I've already been working with. So I can't promote the retreat, but I can promote Karma. She's amazing. And it's not, I know we hear sensuality dance and we're like, nah, girl, no. Body acceptance. And more than that, just like, I don't know. It's just there's a lot that comes out in her sessions. There's a lot that you subconsciously. I know from my group of friends that when we were like, whoa, we had no idea all this and how connected we would feel afterwards. We just felt really connected. So
yeah, and Karma loves to cry. So there's that.
See?
Yeah, that's a safe. Those are always safe spaces for
Yeah.
crying.
Yeah.
But
And
yeah,
we
no,
did.
this is
We
good.
are.
See, there you go.
And her dance it was. So well,
Good.
that's awesome. I don't, you know what? When you said that, I was like, oh, I need to tell about it. Okay, so I'm gonna start writing down like for real, like okay. But I did have this book that I use this book in my retreats. And when you go to my, because we are going to be announcing very soon. I am about to announce, well, it's not so very soon, but in the next couple months, we will be announcing our next retreat for 2024. But one of the things I always give women who are doing, extensive work with me, prolonged work, if it's coaching program or retreat, is I give books because I want people to be able to study and do things on their own. And so this book is called Self-Care for Black Women. Yes. And it's 150 ways to radically accept and prioritize your mind, body, and soul. I know. And so the author, I cannot pronounce her name. I think it's Oludara. So Oludara. And the last name is Adio, and that's AD as in dog, EEYO. But if you can just type in Amazon, Self-Care for Black Women.
Okay.
And it's beautiful because from mourning your losses, doing a grounding exercise, vent to a friend who validates you, right? All these activities to do this deeper, not just, and I'm starting to not really like the word self-care, but this is really, really good. And again, if you join any of my programs, I always give this, to women who do more extensive work with me, but it's a winner. So check it out. It's on Amazon.
Okay. Self-Care for Black women. Okay.
Cool. Yep. Simple as that. It's a very colorful, thing.
I know it's really pretty. I like the
up.
cover. Yeah, that's really cool. Nice.
So so we will be back next Thursday.
We will.
We don't know what we're going to talk about. Yeah, we don't know what we're talking about.
You're not going to know until you tune in. So,
It's KEISAN's turn.
I was going to say, it's my turn to pick the topic. So I try to let y'all, I did at least remember to send the newsletter this week. So you knew what we were going to
I was going to say, I let people know the day of.
Yeah,
I do let them know the time.
Okay. So I think I sent it out yesterday.
You sent it out yesterday. It was beautiful.
Yes. Thank you. So I was like, I did my best, but yeah. So, no, this was great. I'm glad this gave me a lot to think about too. So no, this is good stuff. And then, if anybody watching is interested in having an astrological coaching, reading, leading experience, I'm going to book my appointment with Kenya ASAP. I guarantee you should do it too, because it's very exclusive and she don't be taking a lot of clients for that particular.
It is. I don't. And so I don't advertise a lot because it is. Yeah, but I do take clients and,
She does.
Yes. Yeah. And we'll have to dedicate. I think we should do a live kind of astrological coaching. We can either like bring in a guest and talk a little bit about their chart or whatever. Yeah. But it's, I would say if you are out here and you're wanting to have a new, innovative, fun way of doing some self-exploration and considering self-care, even if you're not one that's really been into, you don't need to have been into astrology, because it's really not so much it's about astrology, but not the way that we've been taught it. So yes, come, because I can tell you all kinds of fun things.
Yes. Awesome.
All right. Well, we'll see you guys next week. You guys be good. All right. Take care. Bye.